Just a quick reminder, I'm running a giveaway for a SNES Mini until the end of March. Check the link in the description. Breath of the Wild was, in a way, a spiritual remake of the first Zelda game. It threw away with the classic Zelda formula that A Link to the Past started and Ocarina of Time defined, instead just focusing on open world exploration. Miyamoto described the first Zelda game as a miniature garden you could keep in your drawer, a little world to which you could go and explore and adventure in whenever you wanted. And I think Breath of the Wild captures this feeling better than any game I've ever played. But another less appreciated callback to the original Zelda, or rather just the old Zeldas in general, is the reimagining and re-inclusion of old school classic Zelda enemies like the Lynel and the Hinox. Lynels, for example, were some of the most powerful enemies in the first Zelda game. Half centaur and half lion, able to shoot sword beams that cut through Link like a hot knife through a block of butter in a green tunic. Lynels appeared in Zelda 1, A Link to the Past and its half remake A Link Between Worlds, and the Oracle games, but then Breath of the Wild gave them a fresh coat of paint in their 3D debut, as arguably the most powerful enemies in the game, attacking with elemental swords or their own Lynel weaponry, fire magic, and Legolas-like accuracy with a bow. Seriously, that's just unfair. Breath of the Wild also reintroduced the Hinox, a classic Zelda enemy that's appeared in A Link to the Past, A Link Between Worlds, Link's Awakening, Four Swords Adventures, Phantom Hourglass, and Triforce Heroes. The Hinox has always been a Cyclops with an affinity for bombs, and in Breath of the Wild they're no different, except for their size. They're one of the overworld bosses in the game, along with their skeletal counterparts the Stalnox, Molduga, the Sand Whales, and the Terranian Taluses. Including these classic 2D Zelda enemies in a 3D Zelda for the first time was an awesome throwback to the original, as was including different enemy strengths denoted by their colours, with red being the weakest and blue being slightly stronger. We know that we are getting another 3D open world Zelda on the Switch, and it does seem that Breath of the Wild will lay the foundations for this game. But one of the biggest complaints about Breath of the Wild, and one that I completely agree with, was the lack of enemy variety in the game. So could the next 3D Zelda feature more reimagined versions of classic Zelda enemies? The Lynel is one of the most iconic classic Zelda enemies, though it was largely forgotten before the most recent entry in the series gave it a 3D overhaul. I'd love it if more classic Zelda enemies got the same Lynel or Hinox treatment in the next Zelda game. So if the next Zelda game does breathe new life into forgotten classic enemies, which ones would I like to see? Let's go through a few. The Iron Knuckle is an enemy you'll absolutely remember if you've played Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, or Adventure of Link. They're the Luigi of the armoured enemies of the series. They don't get the love that the Darknut does, in fact we haven't seen them in the series since Majora's Mask. But personally, I love these guys just as much as their more popular brethren. Iron Knuckles are some of the toughest, most imposing Zelda enemies of all time. Iron Knuckles are powerful knights, usually clad in thick plate armour, wielding either a sword and shield or a colossal battle axe. First appearing in Zelda 2, they appear in multiple variants, blue being the strongest. They fight with a sword and shield, even throwing knives, and the most powerful variant, the boss Rebenak, rides a floating horse and jousts Link. There's also the similar Doom Knocker, an armoured enemy that throws spiked clubs like boomerangs. In Ocarina of Time though, these already awesome knights become even cooler. They're armoured Gerudo, swinging at Link with a massive axe which can smash through stone pillars. They're pretty much the most powerful non-boss enemy in the game, dealing 4 hearts of damage with heavy axe swings that Link can't shield. As you fight them, you can knock pieces of their armour off, which causes them to fight faster and more aggressively. And towards the end of the Spirit Temple, an Iron Knuckles serves as a mini-boss, though it's revealed to be Noboru, the Sage of Spirit, who's been brainwashed and forced to fight in Iron Knuckle armour. This is one of the coolest mini-boss fights in any Zelda game, even at the very start when Iron Noboru stands up from the throne and the mini-boss theme starts, only for it to realise it hasn't summoned its axe yet. The Iron Knuckles are incredibly cool old school Zelda enemies, though we haven't seen them in a Zelda game in around 19 years since Majora's Mask. The next 3D Zelda game could pull a Breath of the Wild on these guys. Imagine entering a clearing in an old forest, where what appears to be a statue stands. However, upon getting closer, you realise it's not a statue, it's a stoic guardian knight defending some ancient treasure, willing to slay anyone that gets too close with their mighty battle axe and throwing knives. This awesome artwork is by Jude Smith. There's a link in the description to more of their work. There's also this artwork by Dreadlock Detective showing their idea for how an Iron Knuckle could have worked in Breath of the Wild, a sort of Sheikah warrior corrupted with malice who would use both an ancient battle axe and a spiked ball with magnesis in battle. Breath of the Wild had some pretty awesome overworld bosses, but you know what it needed more of? Dragons. And no, not the flying snakes, proper fantasy burn you alive dragons. And one of the coolest old school Zelda enemies, often appearing in the earlier games as a boss, is a dragon, GLIAC. GLIAC is a gigantic green dragon, notable for having multiple heads. It's appeared in the very first Zelda game as the boss of level 4, a mini-boss in level 6, and the boss of level 8. It's also made an appearance in Oracle of Seasons and Phantom Hourglass as a boss, though in the DS game it's quite different to how it normally is. GLIAC is essentially a dragon fused with a hydra, the mythical monster slain by Hercules in Greek mythology. A serpentine beast with multiple heads that must be severed and the wound burned shut. GLIAC is killed in most of its Zelda appearances by cutting its heads off. Slicing the GLIAC's neck usually causes the decapitated head to begin flying around the room, fighting you of its own accord independent of the original body. We've seen a similar enemy appear in Skyward Sword, the Staldra, and Undead Hydra. Link needs to read their attack pattern in order to cut off all 3 heads simultaneously to stop them regenerating. While it's similar to the GLIAC, it's just another enemy based on the mythical Hydra, it's not the same monster. I'd love to see a reimagined GLIAC in the next Zelda game. If the Hinox can go from an enemy that's not too much larger than Link into this colossal Cyclops, seeing GLIAC reimagined as a gigantic multi-headed dragon would be a really awesome throwback to one of the most recognisable old school Zelda enemies. In Oracle of Seasons, when its heads have been severed, it continues to attack you as a skeletal dragon. Perhaps we could also see a Stalgliac. Let's continue on the dragon theme with Acromantis, a beast which seems to be half dragon, half unicorn. Acromantis appeared in the original Zelda as well as Oracle of Seasons, just like the GLIAC, meaning we haven't seen either of these draconic adversaries in a Zelda game since 2001. In the original game, Acromantis just attacks by spitting fireballs in groups of 3, but in Oracle of Seasons can fly, as well as charge Link with its horn, aiming to impale him, as well as shoot fire. It can be defeated by normal methods if you can get close enough, though fittingly for a dragon, it's immune to fire-based attacks. Acromantis is a really awesome enemy that hasn't appeared in the series for far too long. Like the Lynel, it's a monstrously powerful beast that would make for such a unique overworld boss. NPCs in villages or camps near where an Acromantis lives could tell stories of sightings of a unicorn in the forest, and that people have left the town in search of its beauty, never to return. Link could then discover that the tales of the unicorn were mistaken, that it's not a valiant, beautiful creature, but a monstrous half-dragon, half-unicorn that has slain all that have got too close, breathing fire or charging them down. Just like the Lynel, I'd love to see the next 3D Zelda game reimagine this classic enemy. Its immunity to fire and its attack patterns from Oracle of Seasons would carry over well to a 3D Zelda game, charging at Link, breathing fire and flying away if it feels threatened. Perhaps Link could even ride it like a Lynel if he got close enough. The Vire is an extremely obscure pick, but an enemy I've always had a weird soft spot for. It only appeared in the original, Link's Awakening, and the Oracle games, but it's one of the more unique Zelda enemies that I'd love to see brought into 3D. Vires are demons made up of Keese, the bats of the Zelda world, who live in darkness and strike from the shadows. Vires are unique in that, if Link hits them, they'll split into 2 Keese and fly off, and even if Link kills these Keese, if he leaves the area and returns, the Vire will still be alive. To truly kill a Vire, he must hit them with a weapon dealing at least 4 hearts of damage, like the bow. In Link's Awakening, they gained the ability to shoot fireballs at Link and will attack him up close if he blocks them. In the Oracle games, Avaya plays a more major role as a minor antagonist and a recurring mini-boss, again an evasive demon made up of keys. Vias are awesome Zelda enemies because they're based on something we hardly see in the series: vampires. Their name likely just comes from the word vampire, and like vampires, they're shadowy creatures who can turn into bats. Breath of the Wild lacked creepy enemies like Gibdos, Poes and more. I remember being disappointed when travelling into labyrinths and forests at night without finding any darker enemies. So if the next 3D Zelda wants a classic gothic Zelda monster to reinvent, the Via is a really unique and interesting choice. The Zelda series has a massive amount of unique enemies that Link has faced over the years. It was so cool to see Breath of the Wild reimagine the Lynel and the Hinox as these behemoths of the wilderness. I'd absolutely love it if the next 3D Zelda did the same thing with some more classic Zelda monsters. What about you guys? What forgotten Zelda enemies would you love to see return to the series in the next game? Let me know in the comments below. Again, there's the giveaway link in the description if you want the chance at winning a SNES Mini. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.